Namaste. Hello and welcome to the Kundalini podcast. That was Zen. This is Tao. I'm Vivek Govekar. Today I'm going to talk about energy and how it relates to the Kundalini energy, what it means to transfer your energy. Now, I've talked about Shaktipat or transmission of the Kundalini energy from the guru to the disciple. And as I've said before, the Kundalini energy is always active in all of us in small amounts. An awakening merely puts that in a hyperdrive, so to speak. I'm wearing a Star Wars t shirt, so I'll use a Star Wars term hyperdrive or warp drive. Uh, and then it starts moving around in your body. But there's a lot more to the energy and the energetic transfer that happens between people, individuals, between just regular interactions that you have with people and how they are affected by the energy. This is episode 40. Uh, so, this also relates to what is called energy vampires and what that whole phenomenon is. I'm going to briefly mention these things and just talk about my experiences as well. So, first thing is when we interact in this world, our interactions are usually some form of some dynamic of power play, someone trying to dominate someone else, someone maybe not happy with some other person's success and trying to bring them down, uh, people ganging up on one person and trying to say, well, this person is not good because they perceive that person as a threat. And sometimes you may have experienced this, but you have some people in your family or your circle of friends that every time you meet that person, after that interaction, you feel very low energy, like the energy has been drained out of you. Someone that constantly berates other people, passes negative comments. And what I realized after a Kundalini awakening is that these interactions are not as innocent as they seem. They involve the transfer of this life force, this key energy between the people. And there's a give and take going on. And sometimes, if some person is constantly in a depressed mode and in a lower status, so to speak, in any group, any room, and generally people pick on that person or put him down or her down, there is an energetic transfer going on. And the people doing it may or may not know it themselves. Very few people go around saying, I'm an energy vampire, I'm going to suck your chi energy out of you. No, they get some kind of an emotional satisfaction through that domination, through that power. And these power trips are usually very negative forces. We don't understand that that is what is going on, but we are victims of that. And you may relate to this in your work environment, in your family environment. And there is a very bad kind of dynamic going on. That relationship is of a host and a parasite. And it's a very negative thing because it diminishes your energy, does not allow you to fulfill your potential. After an awakening, especially when I realized and saw this going on and realized how many of these tentacles of people were in me that were taking away my energy, sapping it, making sure that I wouldn't get the adulation or approval, and yet set up an approval mechanism where you are waiting for that pat on the back from those same people who are not going to give it and put you further down in misery. So, all of this is energetic transfer. So, even if you're not awakened, if you don't have a Kundalini awakening, you can still be aware of this and put in place some practices that help you avoid these uh, traps. First of all, as I've said in the past, stop associating with people that are constantly negative regardless of your relationship with them. They may be very close to you, and you might think socially I'm obligated to be with these people. But really, you're not. You have to look out for your well being. When you're around people that are your friends, that make you feel good, you feel energized after you've had an interaction with that person, it's pretty obvious you're in a good mood. Sometimes these things are unavoidable. If you're in a workplace and a person like that works with you, you can't avoid that interaction. In those cases, it is very helpful to take a stand. Sometimes, if you have to be rude, sometimes you have to push back a little bit, and you're not used to doing that, or you have been told that, no, no, how can you say this thing to such and such a person? The culture I grew up in, it's a very negative thing in some traditional cultures that you're supposed to just follow somebody that is older than you. No questions asked, just older, that's it. And some of these older people aren't really wise, mature, just because they've aged. And they don't really deserve that respect. But they have learned to use that to make you feel uncomfortable or to take charge of that and sap away your energy. And don't fall into that trap. Make sure that you are strong, push back when you need to, even if it goes against convention and wisdom that has been passed on to you. Break through those barriers. As I said, a Kundalini awakening is not a very easy process. It's very tough. And briefly, I have said in the past that interpersonal relationships become rocky. I've said that the old associations I had to be discarded. But these are the details of what and how. This kind of energetic transfer, someone might just cheat you for money or just take credit for what you have done in a minor sense, and that kind of stuff goes on everywhere, rivalries and competition like that. But I'm talking about a person who is miserable, that makes you miserable, and is constantly depressed, constantly in a bad mood, saying negative things. When you are happy, they are not happy, or they take pains to bring more misery into your life. Those kind of things. And those are energetic transfers that are happening between your key energy and theirs. And they feel stronger as a result of that. They need that energy to suck on other people's energy to feel better about themselves. This is a very real phenomenon. So, how do you go about, first of all, yes, avoid those people, but how do you go about making sure that you're completely protected? One thing I've realized is positive affirmations. This is always a wonderful method to put those positive affirmations. I've made a video about it. Um, Mantras, certain mantras in the Hindu tradition are called kavach or armor. And they are of different deities like Shiva kavach or Devi kavach. And these armors become very useful. By listening to those mantras, you're setting up your mental state to be much stronger to be able to withstand these kind of attacks. Also, verbally, if you have been held back in the past, like I had a lot of blockages in my throat chakra. And what that means is your ability to communicate freely, to express yourself freely, has somehow been curtailed or blocked. And once that blockage cleared, even at the risk of sounding rude to some people, even at the risk of shaking up things, I now have no problem being forthright and expressing my opinion, especially if it comes to my own emotional well being. And that is extremely essential. There is a wonderful book called The Power of I Am. I'll put a link down if I find it, or put a bubble here about the author and the details. And another book called Verbal Judo. I found these books to be very helpful in these kind of personal relationships. You get a lot of books about removing people out of your life and getting your relationships better and improve them. But the power of I am, that book specifically, talks about this energetic transfer and this domination or taking away of power that some people attempt, and how to counter that. The book Verbal Judo, this adds to what I have said before about Aikido. And that book, Verbal Judo, is also very helpful. It is about how to get into these conversations and come out with an upper hand without being affected by what people are saying, how some people will try to manipulate you, and how to counter that. If you weren't strong at that before, like I wasn't, these books will help you. But it's critical not only to protect your process after you awaken, uh, in terms of keeping your health, making sure your posture is correct, and letting the energy do all the work, but you are more vulnerable in the initial stages of the awakening until you get stronger. Afterwards, you are much stronger, you're in a better position, and slowly, as you get into higher states of divinity, these things have less of an impact on you. But if you're weaker, if it's a weak muscle that needs to be trained, then these things you have to adapt to even as you're going through this tough process, and you're very vulnerable. And while you're vulnerable, you are trying to get stronger and get out of some of these negative associations that you have set up that are bothering you, hurting you, pulling you downwards. So the power of I am talks about your inner being, I am, and constantly being in touch with that. And using that power to not allow outside forces to harm you. Um, as I've said, a Kundalini awakening is like a plant. First, you have a seed, then that grows into a plant. But in the initial stages, when a seed is growing, when it's a sapling, it needs to be protected even more than the seed does. The seed has its shell that is covered and it's well protected. And the tree, once it becomes a tree, it's well protected, it's strong. But that sapling stage is actually very vulnerable. So it manifested itself in my awakening process as depression, dealing with trauma, dealing with past demons that I had to discard. And this journey into finding out about the truth of relationships that you find toxic, you find to be harmful to you, and how to deal with them. But anybody can put these methods into place and ensure that they are not being attacked by somebody's negative energy and protect themselves from that. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you. Be well.